I thought about commonalities for teachers. I thought about things like class size. I thought about learning curves. I thought about memorization. I thought about even stress that teachers experience in the classroom, because I've experienced it as a TA. And so, but most importantly, I thought about this concept of results. And so I've only been here for 2 years, but one thing this doctoral process has taught me is to prepare for results. And so I've learned everything from developing my scholarly voice to how to prepare for comprehensive exams. And for the most part, I've been told by several professors here and at other places that once I leave here as Dr. Hotchkins, I will inevitably face feast or famine based on my ability to defend and produce my empirical results. And so as the Academy is teaching me about how to present results, I had basically my first year as a TA embodied this process of teaching. And so in doing so and focusing on these results, I began to think about how this type of perspective impacts students. And so I just got back from a conference, the National Black Graduate Student Association Conference in Columbia, South Carolina. And the title of the conference was Transforming the Roads Ahead. And so it made me think about how, as teachers or how as professors, we transform the lives of our students. And so for me, I'm not easily transformed. And so I have to be inspired. I think I'm the quintessential pessimist. And so it is rare that something moves me to the point where I'm inspired to transform. And so it was difficult initially for me to be a teaching assistant. And so I'll give you two examples of things that shifted my thought and helped me be inspired to transform. And so I'm from Oklahoma. And like I said, I got here in 2008. And when I got here, I'd hear this term ally. And so people would always say to me, this person is an ally. And it was always brought to me in a racialized context. And so I have white colleagues who would introduce me to other white colleagues and say, this person is an ally. And I would say, what does that mean? And they say, well, that means that this person gets it, that they understand race and that they're comfortable with race and with themselves in racialized spaces that are diverse. And I said, okay, that's great. And so I would see persons, these same persons, some of them out in different spaces that were not necessarily in academic context, and their behavior was incongruent with what I was told an ally was. And so it got me to beginning to think about, what is an ally? And so for me, I was asked one time that, was I an ally of the LGBTQ community on campus? And so my response was, have you asked them? And so I see an ally as a person that is, the term ally is something that should be applied to people, not something that I own and say that I am. And so if people in the LGBT community see me as an ally, then I accept that. I am one. But I'll never say that I am an ally on my own. And so I thought about, how do I apply this concept of ally into the classroom? And so even though there is a power differential that I am aware of, even though that I'm just a TA, when I teach undergraduate students, I want to make sure that I am an ally for the facilitation of their education. And so as I pondered that, how do I take this belief in being an ally into my classroom, I again thought about results. And so in the classes that I'm in, I've met professors who are all about results. And so they focused on the scholarly me and not necessarily the person or the holistic me. And so I embodied that until one day I was TAing. And so in my multiculturalism in higher ed class, there's a student who comes to me afterwards in tears. And so she's crying because she feels like, because of the intersectionality of her cultural identity, her phenotype, and the way that she was raised, that she doesn't necessarily fit in any certain group. And it made me start to think, well, how can she focus on results and regurgitation of information in my class if she is uncomfortable as an individual, as a person? And so it made me adjust and shift my pedagogy. And so for instance, when I would talk to my students, I address them as scholar. And I tell, at very first class, and I tell them that it is my expectation of you that this is not your first degree that you will attain. And so I set an expectation of them immediately. And so I have this exercise that I do. And so the first day of the syllabus, I have all this stuff on the syllabus. And so they're like, oh man, we're gonna have to, it's like 15 pages long. And so they're like, oh, we're gonna have to go over all this stuff. And so I'm like, we're not covering the syllabus today. I wanna tell you my personal narrative. And so I tell them about my ontology, my epistemology, my axiology, all these terms that I've learned as a doc student. And I tell them about how my experiences, excuse me, are ultimately shaped by my nuclear, my extended, and my fictive family and kin. And so because of those experiences that were told to me and that I have lived, I've arrived at a perspective, a world perspective of how I see the world. And so I had to trick them into doing that without asking them to do it. And so I said, if any of you have cameras, let me know. If you don't, I can come up with some. I want you to go out into the university and take 10 pictures of what you think is valuable to the institution. And then I want you to take that same camera and go into your personal environment and take 10 pictures of what you think is valuable to yourself. And so the students would have to put together these PowerPoints, and they're pretty interesting how they put them together. Students I found that millennials are, I guess, more innovative, more intelligent, or more creative than I am as it relates to presentation. And so they would stand before the class and describe to me in their own personal narrative why these things are valuable to the institution versus themselves. And the one key thing that I found that there was never a slide on the institutional slide that was on their personal slide. And so it made me think about, it reinforced this concept of duality as individual person, as scholar. And so I guess I would call it some type of, I don't know, holistic pedagogy that I tried to employ in the classroom. And the goal was to make the students focus on engaging the literature from a holistic perspective by bringing their entire selves into my class. And so in doing so, it forced them to shift the focus of the class from not just about the literature, or not just about me as the instructor, or not just about them as students, but more about how we engage or we create a communal space in the classroom that is safe, where my students are allowed to be authentic, where they're allowed to be genuine, where they're allowed to be proud of their identity, intersectionality. And so I found that from teaching the first class, where I was just focused on the scholar, and teaching the second class in this holistic way, that it was more inspiring for my students. They were more eager to discuss themselves. At the beginning of every class, I would say, so how was your weekend? And I wouldn't just say it because I see people and they say, so how are you doing today? And so sometimes if I really feel like talking, I'm like, I'm glad you asked. And I just talk to a stranger for like 20 minutes about how's my day. And so when I ask them, how was your weekend? I want to know about their personal being. And so it's my belief that we can't engage the literature unless I know how they are as individuals first. And so it reminded me of this how we engage literature. And so there are theories out there that, because I haven't lived those theories, I really can't relate to those theories. I just memorize them and repeat them and wonder, is this how this experience must be? And so, for instance, whether we're talking about LGBTQ issues or gender issues, Dr. Smith, who is a professor in educational culture and society, has developed this theory about racial battle fatigue. And so racial battle fatigue is what people of color experience as it relates to interacting with race, or the anticipation of interacting with a negative experience that deals with race. And so for me, that's not just a theory. It is lived. It is heightened in this space in Utah, but it is lived for me on a daily basis. And so that theory is more impactful to me than, like I said, some other theory. And so as I try to tie it all together, as a TA, I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned that it is not necessarily my intellectual prowess that I bring to the classroom that garners my students' respect. It is more about how I receive them, how I respect them, how we interact and exchange our ideals or thoughts based on lived experience and theory. And so I guess, in closing, for those of you who are teachers or administrators, for me, my memories of my undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral journeys are more about the rapport and the relationships that I've had with individuals, not necessarily those that said, okay, here's your timeline. So you have 60 months to graduate, and in order to do so, you have to go backwards from 60 all the way to 1. And so although I found that mentoring great, I make most meaning and take most away from the mentoring that is personal. Where when I go in my professor's office, the first thing they ask me is, how do I feel? And so I believe in order for us to continue to make a difference and to transform our students as we challenge them, we have to challenge them not only to be scholars, but to transform themselves internally. And so part of that is nurturing their scholarly selves as well as nurturing their humanistic selves. And that's something that I try to do every day. And so for me, the most important result is knowing that my students are whole, that they're healthy, that they're happy. And so if they're stressed or they can't bring their whole selves to a space, then in that space that I govern as the instructor, what's the point of me being there if the students don't feel like they can be there? So, thank you.